Hi, my name is Stacey Young, and I'm an education and training consultant based in Toronto, Canada. And I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to bring entrepreneurial competencies to the fore of your programming. And I'm going to draw on some Canadian examples for you this morning. On that note, a note about Canada. It's a little complicated. There are 13 provinces and territories, each with its own slightly distinct education system. However, what binds them together is the common language of what we call the 6 C's, or the 6 global competencies. And they are also at the heart of entrepreneur programming in Canada. So again, just to return to the purpose of today's talk, we are going to talk a little bit about teaching and modeling entrepreneurial competencies for the purposes of learning and assessment in more intentional and explicit ways. And this is to give learners the language of entrepreneurship, creation, and invention through reflection on those processes, reflection upon the creative process or the invention process. And we're going to bring real world exposure to the educational process by involving stakeholders in learner assessment in some very simple and manageable ways. So, where to begin? So, in our Canadian example, we started with a program called Investigate, Invent, Innovate, I cubed for short. And the purpose of that program was to guide students through the process of invention. And what we did is we returned to the architects of the program to ascertain and to affirm what the major intended learning outcomes were and what the 5 essential tasks were involved in the program. So the things that we expected students to be able to do upon completion of the program. And then we built an assessment tool, a simple assessment tool predicated on the 5 skills and the 2 competencies and the 1 execution of an idea. So let's move on in the next section to take a deeper dive into these competencies and how they stack up against EntreComp and European entrepreneurial competencies. So in the Canadian context, we have the 6 C's, the 6 global competencies, and they are critical thinking and problem solving, citizenship, collaboration, communication, character development, and creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And the clever person who put these together made them all start with C so we could remember them easily. Now, returning to the program, the I cubed program, we narrowed down in consultation with program architects. We nailed down the 5 essential tasks that we expected students to be able to do upon completion of the program. They included performing basic research and environmental scanning, identifying and following the engineering design process. We expected them to make a prototype of a product or invention for demonstration at a showcase. We asked them to develop a marketing plan, a communications plan that describes the product, how it fits into the marketplace, and we asked them to design and deliver a compelling elevator pitch. Now here we get to how the tasks that I've just described fit in with the global competencies and how they, in turn, by extension, fit into the EntreComp competencies and the broader European entrepreneurial competencies. So take, for example, the example of making a prototype of a product. This requires the student to exercise and demonstrate critical thinking and problem solving, the fact that they have identified a solution to a problem. It requires an exercise in citizenship, in empathy building, in creativity and collaboration, because you have to develop this prototype, this product, with a team. And by extension, EntreComp competencies would identify additional competencies, including mobilizing resources, learning through experience, and ethical and sustainable thinking. Now let's broaden our thinking a little bit about uh, the process of assessment. So, step two. So, after we affirm those intended learning outcomes, we want to design a simple tool that takes those ILOs into account. So, we designed a simple assessment tool based on 2 competencies and 1 skill. And the rubric, as rubrics do, provide criteria for scoring. And we designed it as well in plain language, so for the non-educator. The rubric identified and described those various competencies: communication, execution of idea, and use of the engineering design process. And we asked the volunteers to assess the demonstration of those competencies and skills in 3 levels: 1, emerging; 2, proficient; or 3, highly skilled. So the student was either just demonstrating a gradual grasp of the competency, or they were demonstrating at the other end a mastery of it. And we initially provided volunteers with a paper version of the tool with a clipboard, but we determined very early on that it seemed somewhat obtrusive in the process, so we quickly moved to a phone-friendly Google form, which I designed and even I could use. So very simple. The other piece that's so important about experiential programming is that you get out of the classroom. And what we did was, at the end of this learning process, we would organize a showcase. It could be big or it could be small. Big showcases could involve anywhere between 150 to 250 students. They could be held at a corporate funder's headquarters, at a local company, at a college or university, which are always happy to have children on campus, as well as other organizations like museums. And we would organize it on a regional basis, so we could bring students from across the city together in one place and allow those students to interact and show each other their work. However, we could do it on a smaller scale because there are busing costs and other costs involved when the event is held in a larger venue, where there may be a small fee involved. But on a smaller scale, these showcases could be held in a school. Perhaps another class from a neighboring school could be invited. The event could be held in a gymnasium, and there could be a smaller exchange, but still beyond the school itself where the program is held. Now, moving on to the success rubric, you'll see I'm just going to describe it a little bit without going into it in detail. But on the left column, we have some guiding questions. So this provides the volunteer with a bit of a hint as to how to initiate that conversation with students. And moving to the right column, the next column, the competency and skill, those are hints for the assessor to understand what they're looking for, most generally. And so it describes the 5 essential elements of an elevator pitch, describes what the execution of an idea is, and what critical thinking and problem solving looks like. And then on the 3 next columns on the right, emerging, proficient, and highly skilled, we give the volunteer some concrete clues as to what to look for to help them adjudicate the demonstration of the competency. And we provide volunteers with any support that they wish. We've held conference calls with groups of volunteers. We developed a kit that included a deeper dive into the program goals and a description of the program. But at the top of the rubric, we provide volunteers with some simple advice, which is essentially, this is not a competition. Send the students home feeling accomplished. There's no judging and no failure. And feedback is captured on the rubric, but it should be provided to the student in real time at the event. And make sure you celebrate the uniqueness of every project and suggest areas of improvement. And above all, have fun. So let's just touch on a little bit on the relevance of the competencies and a little bit in more detail. So the communication competency has 5 essential elements as we develop the curriculum to reflect. That an elevator pitch, we need to hear in an elevator pitch the why of the project. So why should we care about the project? And the pithier this is, the better. What is the problem or need that you identified? What is the solution that you've developed to address that problem? So what is the fit between the problem and the solution? What does the team look like that worked on this project together? Where were their strengths and weaknesses, and how did you compensate? How did you assign jobs based on what people were interested in, what their skills were? And then finally, what's the ask? What's the next step that the team needs to bring this project to fruition? The next is the execution of, the execution of the vision, so the technical skill. So we ask students to develop that prototype, and at the showcase, we ask students to demonstrate the prototype for the volunteer. And essentially the question is very simple. Did it work? And the third is that we ask students to reflect on the design and innovation process and how they use the engineering design process to do this. So we've asked the volunteer to prompt a kind of reflection process on the part of the student at the showcase as a final area that we are asking them to assess. In general, our conclusion, our recommended takeaways on this experiment was that you make what you measure meaningful, and that speaks to the fact that you have to go back and make sure that your intended learning outcomes are what you're assessing in the final act. And start with what's manageable. So we isolated 2 competencies we thought were central to the project, to the program, and 1 skill. And we designed a simple tool that provided pointers to the volunteers to help them adjudicate the demonstration of the competencies and skill. And above all, this is about having fun and exposing students to an experience that is unlike that they get in the classroom. But again, make sure you have fun.